Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. I want to introduce you to Nicole Freiling. Nicole, how you doing today?
Good, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, hey, so glad that you're here. And you are a counselor in the area. And some of you who are part of our women's ministry, Thrive, might recognize Nicole because you spoke at a Thrive gathering back in February, right?
I did.
You talked about fear and anxiety. And so I thought it'd be helpful, as we're in this series on emotions, and last weekend we talked about fear and anxiety in the weekend sermon, just to hear from you, some of your perspective. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So I'm wondering, first off, I know that you're a counselor and you work with people who are dealing with anxiety, but is that something that's part of your story?
Yeah, I actually spent most of my life being just a really naturally fearful person.
Okay, yeah.
So anxiety is something that I've struggled with pretty much my entire life. Into adulthood even. And I think that's a misconception that sometimes, counselors have it all together and don't struggle with any of these things.
Yeah.
But no, it's absolutely something that I've dealt with my entire life. Yeah.
And that for me, that resonates because I don't even know that I realized this growing up until much later, but I am an anxious person. And I would describe my anxiety as like chronic anxiety, so not necessarily like clinical, but just like I don't think I'm ever gonna completely conquer it. It's just kind of has to be managed in a sense. Is that resonate with your journey as well?
Yeah, and I think so often when we talk about these things, we feel like the goal is to get rid of the emotion. And I try to help people understand that it's not necessarily to get rid of the emotion, but to kind of change our relationship to that emotion.
Yeah.
The word manage is good because we may never fully get rid of that.
So this is going to sound funny, but you know what the feelings wheel is? Like that little, it's like a circle and it has all these colors and emotions. Maybe it's because I'm a guy, maybe it's because I'm just weird, but I struggle to understand what I'm feeling. And so something I've learned is to sit down with this feelings wheel and I just try to think through like, okay, what exactly am I feeling? And it just helps me kind of identify what's going on. So that I can better respond to it.
Yeah, that's a really helpful process. Actually, I encourage a lot of my clients to do that.
Okay.
There's that phrase, name to tame. Just naming our emotions helps to decrease the intensity of them. So just being able to name that, check in with yourself throughout the day or in the morning, and just see how it is that you're feeling, be able to put a specific name to it, and then that can help you see what you need based on that, and then help you be more intentional with your responses.
So yeah, like you've dealt with anxiety in your own life, and then of course you're a counselor. You meet with people throughout the day and help them with a variety of challenges, and one of those things would be anxiety. And so let's say I showed up in your office, and I'm dealing with fear and anxiety. Where would that conversation go? What are some of the things that you might say to me or resources you might point me to or whatever? I
think first we would probably start with just talking about emotions in general, like we're doing here and like you're doing in the series. Again, learning to name them, understanding that we're created in God's image and He's an emotional God. And so we are emotional beings. So being able to take some of the shame away with some of the emotions that we feel. And then I also like to help clients understand that emotions, intense emotions like anxiety, a lot of times show up in a cycle. And so we can start to look at that cycle and what the patterns are. So we're looking at our triggers, our thoughts, our emotions, how that feels in our bodies, and then the behaviors that we're doing, either active behaviors or withdrawal behaviors with that. And so I think when we can gain that self-awareness of where we're at, we can then be more intentional about getting to where we want to be with that.
That's interesting. And the whole cycle thing, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I spent pretty long in my life, like not really understanding why things were happening, at least in me, So like somebody would say something or something would happen and I just like, it's almost like I would like spin out. And for me, my counselor helped me recognize those cycles. It's like, I think maybe because I just kept telling the same story over and over and it's like, hey, time out. You recognize that like when somebody does this or this happens that like that triggers that fear. So that's really helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, our brains and our bodies, they act really efficiently. God has created us that way. We act out of habit. And so we have a lot of these automatic thoughts. So it's very normal to have something happen and continue to react in the same way.
Yeah.
So to be able to kind of slow that process down a little bit, get to know yourself a little bit more intentionally. And when we're stuck, we usually need to think or do something different.
Yeah.
And so let's take a look at what do we need to think or do differently to help get unstuck from that.
Yeah. It works, but it's really hard.
Yes, it is. It is hard.
It takes a lot of intentional focus.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're a Jesus follower, Christian, and maybe in your practice or just in your personal life, like, are there some scriptures that you go to that you would point people to just in the area of fear and anxiety?
Yeah. I think a common one is Philippians 4:6-7. It talks about not being anxious and taking our requests to the Lord. And that's a wonderful verse and a helpful verse for a lot of people. But I think if we expand that out and take a look at Philippians 4:4-9, really offers us, I think, a broader framework for dealing with anxiety and talking about intentional joy and gratitude. There's spiritual practices mixed in there. And then verse 9 really takes us to the thought life part of it, which is part of the most impactful part because it's the part of the cycle that happens first. So if we can take a look at, okay, if I'm not supposed to be worrying or being fearful, what is it that I should be thinking about? And then also, of course, it talks about prayer and that communication with God. Because we're emotional beings and He's an emotional God. And so I think that naming that and being able to use that as a way actually to connect with Him. And I think we can look at all parts of the Trinity having emotion, really, God and Jesus. And we talk, it talks about grieving the Holy Spirit, like all of that. So I think it's comforting and helps to kind of validate that emotions in and of themselves don't have to be good or bad. They're just part of our human experience.
Oh, that's great. That's helpful. So, hey, I just want to thank you for taking some time to talk with me and share some of your learning, some of your experience with anxiety and fear. And also, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I know that you meet with a lot of people, just encouraging them, helping them become more emotionally healthy, pointing them toward Jesus. That's really good work, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And hey, if anything resonated with you in this conversation, I just encourage you to reach out to us. You can find us at adabible.info and contact, if you're somebody that's dealing with fear or anxiety or just have more questions about something that was talked about, you can do that. Contact there, send us an email. We would love to talk with you. And just a practical step for all of us, maybe read that passage from Philippians. Might be really helpful as we all wrestle with fear and anxiety. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great week.